Welcome to another day in Gray and New Gloucester, and thank you for tuning in to Redeeming Times. I heard a story about a preacher in a rural community many years ago about one of the farmers there in the area. Their house had burned down, and so to help out, the preacher went around the community trying to solicit some gifts to help the farmer get restarted again. And he came to one particular farmer and he asked him, he said, look, he says, our neighbor over here has lost his house and he's lost a lot of things. He said, could you help him out and give him a contribution? And he kind of said, well, you know, preacher, I don't have a whole lot of things. And the preacher said, well, if you had 2 horses, would you give him one? He said, well, preacher, you know I'd give him one. Well, if you had 2 cows, would you give him one? He said, well, you know I'd give him one. He said, now, if you had 2 pigs, would you give him one? He said, preacher, now you know that's not fair because you know I only have 2 pigs. Yeah, well, that kind of says what the whole story really comes down to. We're willing to give what we don't have. But God doesn't ask us to give what we don't have. He asks us to give from what we do have. And in the text in the book of Mark, in chapter 14, it talks about the account prior to Jesus' death and crucifixion. We have the account that Mary came to him with a box full of precious ointment. She broke the box and she anointed his body with this precious, costly perfume. Probably cost her a year's worth of wages. And when she did that, the disciples began to grumble and complain and thought, what a waste. That could have been given to the poor. And I want you to notice what Jesus said about what she had done. He said, let her alone. Why trouble you her? She hath wrought a good work on me. For you have the poor with you always, and whenever you will, you may do them good. But me you have not always. She hath done what she could. And that phrase, she hath done what she could, stood out. You know, that's all we can do, is to do what we can. He commended her and said we need to remember that. And I think a part of the reason we need to remember it is because God isn't asking us to do things that we cannot do, but He's asking us to do the things that we can do. It's what we have that we can do for Him today, or allow Him to do through us today. There's a fellow who didn't have much, and I came across this poem, and I thought it was very appropriate. He said he couldn't speak before a crowd. He couldn't teach a class. But when he came to Sunday school, he brought the folks in mass. He couldn't sing to save his life. In public, couldn't pray. But always his jalopy was just crammed each Lord's day. And though he couldn't sing, nor teach, nor even lead in prayer, he listened well, he had a smile, and he was always there, with all the others whom he brought, who lived both near and far. And God's work was greatly prospered, for he had a consecrated car. There are many times that you and I perhaps feel like whatever things that we have to do or to give aren't very much, and they don't mean a whole lot. And Ray Boltz has written a song that kind of addresses this issue. And I'm going to read the words to the song. I'm not going to sing it, I'll spare you that. But it kind of speaks to where we are. Many of the things that we do, we don't really think that they're of great significance, or perhaps they don't have a great impact. But God's not asking us to do great things. God's asking us to do the things that we can. But the song talks about a teacher who was somewhat discouraged. Let me read it for you. It says, I dreamed I went to heaven, and you were there with me. We walked along the streets of gold beside the crystal sea. We heard the angels singing, and someone called your name. You turned and saw this young man, and he was smiling as he came. And he said, friend, you may not know me now. And then he said, but wait, you used to teach my Sunday school when I was only 8. And every week you would say a prayer before the class would start. And one day, when you said that prayer, I asked Jesus in my heart. Then another man stood before you and said, remember the time a missionary came to your church and his pictures made you cry? You didn't have much money, but you gave it anyway. Jesus took the gift you gave, and that's why I'm here today. One by one they came, far as I could see, each life somehow touched by your generosity. Little things that you had done, sacrifices made, unnoticed on the earth, but in heaven now proclaimed. And I know up in heaven you're not supposed to cry, but I am almost sure there were tears in your eyes as Jesus took your hand and you stood before the Lord. And He said, my child, look around you. Great is your reward. Thank you for giving to the Lord. I am a life that was changed. Thank you for giving to the Lord. I am so glad that you gave. How true it is. We'll never know the impact of our work and our labor until we get to glory. So, no, maybe you and I don't have a lot to offer. Then this woman, perhaps she didn't have a lot to offer. But it said she's done what she could. And I know a lot of people who think that they've got nothing to offer. But tell you what, let us do what we can and leave the results in God's hands. And I'm convinced God can do great things. For the songwriter said, little is much when God is in it. I pray for all of us in Gray and New Gloucester, and for those who travel through, that you, Lord, will bless each one according to their needs. In Jesus' name. Remember to cast all your care upon Him, because He cares for you.